Welcome to PGurus Prime Time. I'm your host Sree Iyer, and today I have with me Professor M D Nalapat. Before we jump on to the topic of the day, let us welcome Professor Nalapat to our channel. Professor Nalapat, namaskaram and welcome to PGurus channel.
It's always a pleasure to be on your channel, Sree. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you very much for those kind words, sir. And viewers, today we are going to talk about China's multi-dimensional, multifaceted aggression against two big countries, big powers, India and the United States. And this is going to be some sort of like a question and answer session where I'm going to be your representative. I'm going to be asking many of the questions perhaps you, the viewer, may have in your mind. And some of them may be like a conspiracy theorist kind of thing, and Professor Nalapat will set me straight. Some we may not have answers, but it is important to understand, looking at all the things that are happening, to really see what exactly where it started and where is China headed with this kind of a scorched earth policy. The reason I say scorched earth policy is because look at the number of places where it is trying to engage itself militarily. Let us start there. Professor Nalapat, during Trump's time, there was effective channeling or patrolling, if you will, of South China Sea, East China Sea, Taiwan Straits, and things like that. Now it's sort of sporadic. I'm not saying it's completely gone. It looks like a little bit sporadic. So, what do you make of the Biden administration's approach towards China?
Well, I'd like to say, Sree, that from around April last year, I've been fairly optimistic about the Biden administration not coming to any different conclusions about China than President Trump very publicly came out with. I mean, Biden is not Trump, so I think he's less public. But I think whether it's him or Jake Sullivan or others or the CIA director, I think they fully understand the problem they're facing from China. They're reluctant to call it that openly, to call it what it is, which is a threat. But you have countries like Germany, for example, that openly say, and the chap who's going to take over from Angela Merkel has been very public about this. No. Germany is doesn't regard China as a threat. Germany regards an opportunity. It's not a threat. So I don't really like to say that I don't believe that the Biden administration is very different from the Trump administration. The problem with both Trump and Biden is that in the case of Trump, he regarded those who worked in the top tier of the administration, the White House, NSC, etc., essentially as employees. And employees, someone you can fire anytime, you can kick around anytime. And I think Trump has not been the most pleasant of bosses, judging by his performance as president. Well, at the same time, he knew very well that there was a limit to what he could do in a 24-hour day. And neither Trump nor Biden would have had a 24-hour work day. I mean, there are folks like you who definitely probably have a 16-hour work day. I doubt that Biden or Trump will have even close to a 12-hour workday, if not even less than an 8-hour workday. Given that, I think he used to go with the bureaucratic opinion. First of all, he made the mistake of seeing these departments in silos. CIA, NSC, state, and if I may say so, the National Institutes of Health, headed by the no less than the redoubtable Dr. Anthony Fauci. That's the only reason I can find that he went by the consensus among officials that Fauci was irreplaceable, when actually the first thing he needed to do was to send Fauci out. Now, the problem with Biden is very respectful of the bureaucracy. He's not a guy who really wants an out-of-the-box solution unless it's presented to him within the bureaucracy as being the only solution possible. For example, the consensus on China. I mean, Biden has been echoing a consensus that's been there for a long time that no. I don't think Clinton is anywhere near the Hillary Clinton board. And I think they all told him about China. And therefore, Biden was very clear about China. So far as health is concerned, I think he went by the consensus opinion, and the consensus opinion has been made by people who are terrified of Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci is, I mean, I have met people in India, frankly, who are, who remember, people whom they know in the United States, in other parts of the world, including in India, who have, basically been at the receiving end of threats delivered first, second, third hand, usually second and third hand by Dr. Fauci. I mean, the entire system was paralyzed with fear of Dr. Fauci in that particular sector that he's the czar about. And, being the czar of a sector, you get to shape the narrative. As the Chinese Communist Party will tell you, or Xi Jinping will tell you, what's the point of being general secretary of the most powerful political party in the world if you can't shape the narrative that's going on in the People's Republic of China? So Fauci is as the czar. If he remains as the czar, the narrative is going to be another cover-up of the WHO model. This is going to destroy Biden and his Democratic Party, and in 2022, they're going to cut a very sorry figure. And if they do that, there is scope even for a revival of Donald Trump. So Biden is committing harakiri by listening to the manufactured consensus got by Dr. Fauci over the last year and a half. And whether he can free himself from that or not, I don't know. But regarding, if I may say so, the origin of COVID, well, Biden is not ready to believe that is China. Possibly Biden is not among those who understand the Chinese culture, tradition, and philosophy. And Chinese culture and tradition teaches you that war, it's hardly ever kinetic warfare. In fact, like almost every other country, even I think it was Clausewitz who said, war is politics by other means. In other words, you exhaust other means and you turn to war. Well, the Chinese turn to war if they have no option. But before that, they did war on society in the United States and India, for example, and definitely in the UK, definitely in Japan, by ensuring through their social media control, remote control of social media voices, that the fringes of society, what you call the right and left fringe, they become stronger and stronger at the expense of the moderate middle. And let me tell you one thing, if the moderate middle starts shrinking at the expense of either fringe, you saw that in the United States. The violence that was let loose during the very justified, Black Lives Matter movement. Black Lives Matter movement is a very important and justified movement. The violence that took place was not through any of the sponsors of that movement. It was the infiltrator group within that. And the question is, who funded, who incentivized, or rather, who created the toxic atmosphere of hate that created that? Who caused the toxic atmosphere of hate that caused ordinary Americans from all across America? I've come to your country many times. I've traveled in the early 1990s in Tennessee, in Georgia, in Alabama, states that were frankly, where the majority of the community was not ready to accept that man is created in the image of God and everybody is equal. They consider themselves good Christians and having torn up this fundamental tenet of the Bible that Jesus Christ exemplified in his teachings, in his life. So I'd like to point out that Chinese definition of war is complex. They're not just waging war on the battlefield. You're seeing them with considerable success in the South China Sea, with some success on the Himalayan Massif. Very recently, as you and I have talked about, the Kailash Heights was given to them in the sense Indian troops withdrew from there. We don't know as and when they're going to come over, but in the expectation they'll reciprocate. They never did, and was pointed out at that time by me they never would. So possibly Biden has fallen into that trap in some ways, and therefore possibly he's only looking at the kinetic option. But Sree, when you're dealing with a problem as complex as China, a threat as complex as China, you've got to look at a comprehensive look at what they are doing in your society.
Thank you, Professor Nalapat. And I just want to kind of look at what India has been doing in the past, say, 20, 25 months. Because we looked at what happened in US, and let's take a look at what has happened in India. On April 20th, 2020, there was clear indication from United States and also some India's own spy agencies that the Chinese had amassed at the border. Yet, the think tanks, the Defense Department think tanks, thought that they should ask what the Russians thought of it, and they took Russians' advice, who said that China is not going to do anything. But China did do something, and then you saw what played out after that, unfortunately ending in the June incident in Galwan. But the point here is India had some sabotage elements perhaps from within. It could be even inaction, but even that at the time of war can be fatal. So let's just leave it at that. And then what happened? India waited to see who becomes the president in the United States. And after that, the early indications that India got from US was that US was essentially putting a cold shoulder, especially to the Quad. They were saying that Japan is an ally, X is an ally, Y is an ally, India is a partner. So there was a clear effort made in the initial days of the Biden administration to make India feel not so welcome. I'm just putting myself in the shoes of the Ministry of External Affairs and the Prime Minister's office and the Prime Minister and the MEA, that look, these guys are not probably going to be with us. We'll have to do something on our own. I don't know if perhaps that was what caused the talks to happen, and then India pulled back from Galwan Heights, thinking even if we make the Chinese pull back from where their positions were, wipe that map on the ground and take down some of these things, that itself is a victory, because China has never done in the past. India is only always thinking about what happened in the past, now it's better, that kind of an outlook. They are not really looking at, this is a menace, this needs to be dealt with once and for all. Easy for me to say that, but your thoughts on where India, now again, in US is beginning to blow warm towards India, because perhaps the alleged defection of the senior MSS official along with his daughter has opened some Pandora's box of secrets that now the Biden administration is aware of about the Chinese plans. I'm again playing a conspiracy theorist here. I can be wrong, so viewers, don't take my word for it. We're just asking and playing out scenarios. So your response to how India has been dealing with the China problem, could they have done things differently? If so, how?
Look, Sree, I want to tell you very clearly, you and I have discussed this program many times. We both want Narendra Modi to get re-elected in 2024. In 2019, he was, I know, personally, even I was having doubts whether his party would come back with a majority. But then Balakot happened. And the best news of all for Narendra Modi, Rahul Gandhi got anointed as the substitute for Narendra Modi. I think with those double self goals, Modi's path to a majority became clear from that moment onwards. So, as far as Trump is concerned, I have been saying from 2015 that the Prime Minister, to various people who I know has access, I'm not going to mention their names, that he should meet President Trump. Friends in the US were telling me Trump is ready to fly anywhere across the US or wherever he is, just to have an hour with Prime Minister Modi. This was the case throughout 2016. But no, there was no such meeting. Well, from April onwards, you read my writings. Don't take my word for it. I'm not talking about my private briefings. I'm talking about public writings. I was very confident of a Biden victory, and subsequently I was very confident of Kamala Harris coming. So my advice again, conveyed informally, because I have absolutely no role in government, I have no connect in government, was, for heaven's sake, don't put all your hope in the Trump basket. Don't do that. Ab ki bar Trump Sarkar. It could be ab ki bar Biden Sarkar. And at least do something which you didn't do in 2016. Meet, candidate Biden and meet Vice Presidential candidate Kamala Harris. Not only did that not happen, I'd like to say, Sree, that people who are considered, I mean, I don't believe that they are in any way representing Prime Minister Modi's views. He's a very strong personality. I don't think he'll allow anyone to represent his views. But people who the world believes represented his views were vitriolic about Biden. For months and months and months, we're talking 9 to 10 months here. Not vitriolic, I mean, but, acidly vitriolic. Even more acidly vitriolic about Kamala Harris. For heaven's sake, Sree, I am totally opposed to any form of racism. Any form of racism. And I'd like to give credit to the American people. That's why I was quite unhappy at what happened during the Black Lives Matter movement, especially because I know from Martin Luther King onwards, the movement, the Black justice movement has been sought to remain peaceful by its leaders. I was unhappy at the January 6th uprising. It was definitely an insurrection for the that they wanted Mike Pence to commit an illegality and certify someone who was not elected as the president, ignoring someone who was elected. If Mike Pence had done that, he would have spent the next 20 years of his life arguing not with Trump or some Republicans, but with the American judiciary. So, quite frankly, I'd like to say that it didn't happen. What you're saying about the Himalayas, I think I recall in April or so our own conversations on that subject. I remember, public statements that the Chinese are massing on the border. Let's not, believe that they're massing because they've suddenly become votaries of Gandhian nonviolence. I mean, we may believe in, for example, a Gandhian version of the Quad, completely non-militarized. Don't forget, Sree, India officially, through very, if I may say so, very top personalities, has publicly said, and that's not been refuted, that India regards the Quad as an entirely non-military grouping. Had the United States said, no, India is an ally, in public, the first country that ever objected would be India. Now, all I'm saying is, the problem is that I think both Prime Minister Modi as well as External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, I think they have the problem which a lot of leaders in different countries do, who look after states, who look after, if I may say so, who look after national affairs, who have come from the states to national affairs, and that is that there is a certain amount of reliance on officials. And possibly the official opinion was conveyed to them that, no, the Chinese, don't worry, we have enough information on that. And they went by that. I know, for example, on very many items, the politicians, I mean, I've talked to some of them personally. I said, no, you're wrong on this. How are you telling me that? There is something that happened in 2016. I'm not going to repeat it. And I wrote a piece in Sunday Guardian soon after that was done, stating that the top officials around the Prime Minister at that time were unanimous that that particular measure was the best that could ever be done to India. Subsequently, a year later, they were unanimous that the GST construct as rolled out, which you and I know was full of glitches, very excessive rates of taxation, unworkable, frankly, in many respects, and very difficult to ensure compliance with. Well, the entire bureaucracy, almost without exception, whether it is the agencies or departments inside government or external think tanks, so-called external think tanks that are, frankly, know that their funding depends on what they on their ability to judge the prevailing wind of opinion at, in the higher reaches of policy. And I mean, that was gone by, and as a consequence, something was declared, which later on had to be amended and amended and amended. As indeed the first thing was, when actually they were very good concepts, they were excellent concepts, but they had to be implemented in a proper way that did not harm the economy in the case of the first, and the case of the second, that did not make a torture out of compliance, and did not inflict too high a charge on industry to stunt its growth. This didn't happen. So I'd like to say, Sree, for your particular comment about your country, I can tell you my country would have been the first to react, say, no, we are not allies. For heaven's sake, we are definitely not allies. We believe in balance. They don't use the word non-alignment anymore. They use the word that I, in fact, popularized, all alignment. At that point in time, let me tell you honestly, Sree, till about 2017 also, I was having my own illusions about the Chinese. Illusions that, they could be brought around to understanding the utter stupidity of going with Pakistan and losing India in the way that the US did during Cold War 1.0. The utter stupidity in Cold War 2.0 of alienating India and by sticking to Pakistan. For the same reason as in Cold War 1.0, there was no question of India joining hands with that. The Clinton, White House, the kind of pressure they put on Narasimha Rao to try and surrender his nuclear weapons, surrender Kashmir to Pakistan. Would any self-respecting government have been able to do that? Of course not. And Narasimha Rao did not do that, even though Rao wanted an alliance with the United States. In 2003, Atal Bihari Vajpayee reached out to George W. Bush and said, look, we are the world's largest democracy. We have a fantastic armed forces. Let's come together against the threat of terror that you face. And guess what those great geniuses, George W. Bush and Dick Cheney did? What did they do? They embraced Pakistan. The arsonist was given the keys to the fire brigade. Now, and from then on, Afghanistan has gone only one way. You guys have been defeated, badly defeated, and frankly, the Afghans hate you. You're lucky. They still hate Pakistan more than they hate you, and they absolutely will not tolerate coming under the Taliban. But the fact that the Taliban grew was because of American policy, initiated by Bush and continued by Obama for a substantial period of time. So please, Sree, don't let's talk of the mistakes your country and my country have made. Let's not be absurd and say that because they don't listen to each other. We are ordinary people. We don't deserve to be listened to, and we're not listened to. That's fine. But I'd only like to say, in this particular game, I can tell you, both our countries are equally guilty. And in the case of Cold War 2.0, the Pakistan-China nexus that some of us have been writing about in detail, as I said, my moment of truth came that my thinking was utopian. And by 2018, I came to the conclusion it was impossibly utopian. By 2019, I had developed much more on that. By 2020 or 2019, as a matter of fact, I started going more public with the fact that this is Cold War 2.0, which I've been saying for many years now, but if I have publicly saying, and in Cold War 2.0, we have no option but to go with the United States. No option but to challenge China. The way at that Cold War, we had no option but to go with the Soviet Union, but not to challenge the United States, which I think we did. So with all his faults, Nehru did play a balancing act in some respects. He gave up Tibet. He gave up the UNSC. He kind of tried to knacker the private sector. He did many things wrong, but he did a few things right. And this was among them. A lot of good things have been done by this government. That's why I say I want Modi back in 2024. But let me tell you one thing, Sree. It's not in 2023, but right now in 2021. I am beginning to be concerned about whether what you want and I want will take place if this present trajectory is followed.
Well, Monuji, let's take a look at now the next step, which is the action or the reaction to what China's actions were. And let's take a look at, I'll first say India and then I'll talk about US and then you can give your
I just want to add one more point on COVID, for example.
Yeah.
We went by WHO
Yeah.
consensus when it was obvious, I mean, even to a 12-year-old kid with some use of logic. I mean, if you were to, based on the published data that came out then but was ignored by Fauci, by WHO for reasons that need a complete investigation. And we went by that WHO consensus, which was not worth the paper it was printed on.
Well, so let me tell you how I see this whole thing. At least when India tried to respond, it completely shut off all the software that was coming out of China because they saw that India's data was being harvested by China through their apps and being put to good use. Now, the same thing the United States tried under Trump. Guess what happened today? The Department of Commerce, the Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, she was the governor of Rhode Island before. She owns shares in WeChat, which is the parent company of TikTok. And she has pushed this Biden administration to allow TikTok to function normally in US again. And now, you know, this is, if this is not conflict of interest, I don't know what it is. How can, first of all, she should not have, she should have sold her, she should have made it public that she owns shares in WeChat. She should have sold that thing completely to distance herself before she becomes the commerce secretary. None of that happened. Now she's batting for them. So now China is beginning to awaken all its, hidden sources now to bat for it in United States. I'm ashamed that this kind of stuff is happening under the Biden administration and that things seem to somehow continue to go along where, you know, it's very, very clear that what is going on is absolutely wrong. At least I commend India that they have stuck to the thing that the apps are banned, we're not turning them back on. India did a brave step. I mean, India is not as plentiful in terms of its economy as US is, where and US has a lot of resources to come up with TikTok-like apps. So my point here is, in this particular situation, the United States has much to learn from India, and like you said, both need to be allies and not just partners. That is my call. You can tell me what you think, sir.
Well, I fully agree about that point. I also fully agree Narendra Modi has proved to be a very able administrator, and he was the first to introduce this kind of an app ban. And unfortunately, we are still heavily dependent for smartphones on Chinese-used mobiles. So I'm sure you know, Sree, there's more than one way to get data leaks, and you also know the importance of AI and data from India in AI. So I think we have to plug all the leaks. And I'm sure the Prime Minister is working hard to do that. As far as this particular thing is concerned, well, all I can say, if Joe Biden's party faces defeat in the House of Representatives and a further setback in the US Senate, Joe Biden is going to be the lamest lame duck for a long time in the US presidency. He's going to take the Democratic Party down with him. So if what you're saying is right, and he doesn't fire the Commerce Secretary, as he should have long back fired Fauci, who, you can't, any survey that is done when Fauci remained the czar of the NIH is meaningless. And clearly, any action against China that is done, by a Commerce Secretary who has invested in China and who therefore has a vested interest in seeing these Chinese companies that are sucking up data from the United States grow. Well, I'd like to say, I think Joe Biden will take the party with him, but I don't know what's going to happen in the United States. Perhaps he'll wake up, perhaps he'll not. We'll know in the course of time. Modi, I'm sure, he is starting to wake up on many of these things. On the virus, for example, on WHO, although we are still using the WHO mantra, oh no, WHO, because we are still using the UNO mantra. Well, long back, there was a gentleman called Jawaharlal Nehru who turned down the offer of India becoming a permanent member of the UN Security Council. India from 1949 onwards pushed for China to be made a permanent member. Well, guess what? India got its wish subsequently. And guess what? You know, the Chinese have been blocking India ever since. And ever since they've been talking about the UN system as being the system to discipline errant countries. And errant country, they don't mean themselves. They have a veto. If any such resolution comes forward, you can bet that at least 2 of the 5 states will vote against that. And you know who those 2 states are. It is why some of us have been a little unhappy about this S-400 deal, because in the next kinetic conflict with China, it is coming. We need to have a seamless logistical arrangement with the United States. We don't need troops, not even one soldier, but we need a logistical arrangement. And I think we'll need a certain amount of logistical assistance from the US Air Force and the Navy to ensure that the Chinese feel the pain of invading the Himalayas across the other boundaries that they're seeking to control and cross. So I do believe that Prime Minister Modi has in fact understands the situation. And I think he'll slowly come to the realization that his continuance in 2024 is on the line in case he does not. He's an extremely shrewd person. He's a committed person. He's a patriot. He's straightforward. And I'm certain that this year we will see the Prime Minister understanding the situation on the ground. And he will surprise those who were now beginning to, get their suits ready for the swearing-in ceremony at Rashtrapati Bhavan sometime in 2024.
Well, let's take a look at the next thing that we were kind of segueing towards that, which is the virus itself. Now, one of the things that has emerged, and data is still continuing to emerge about this, after the defection of this very senior security official to United States and the terabytes of data that he brought with him, now the finger of the needle of suspicion clearly points to a leaked virus from Wuhan being the COVID virus. 2 things that kind of make it hard for China to disprove that. One is that usually it starts from bats, it goes to something else, some other animal that becomes a carrier, and from there it comes to human beings. In this case, that was not the case. Second thing is the size of the thing. It was 20 times bigger than any SARS virus before that. And that kind of stuff almost looks like it was manufactured for maximum impact. Now, that is one thing. The second thing that is interesting is I am trying to piece together the happenings in Mumbai and in India. Remember that there was an IPS officer caught with a radiation suit on? Why was it having a radiation suit on unless he was trying to do something more? And I am going to tell you that if the first Wuhan virus was a lab experiment, then perhaps the double mutating virus that got released in Mumbai, perhaps at Dharavi, for maximum impact, could have been also another lab virus. And when somebody so senior, an IPS officer, is wearing a radiation suit and going about, that tells you that the person was scared for his life, whatever he was doing. So I'm saying that there is more and more and more credible data emerging about the fact that China is now indulging in warfare which is more bioterror, and there is something that is going to break soon. I don't know if whatever I am saying today you agree with me or not, Professor Nalapat, but this is how I see it, and I hope my viewers back me up by way of comments if you think that there was something strange about an IPS officer being caught with a biohazard suit. Please go ahead, sir.
Well, I wonder what happened to that particular officer. I presume he has been intensively interrogated, just as I presume those who advise the government that they should withdraw from Kailash Heights because the Chinese will then withdraw from Pokhara and Hot Springs, which some of us pointed out in the very beginning will never happen. Well, I think they also need to be interrogated, and certainly this chap, from what you described, needs to be interrogated. I mean, personally, I have no, in the sense, no, any kind of clear information about this particular defector that you're talking about. I've seen some news snippets, but until something clearer emerges, I don't know. But let me tell you one thing, Sree, that if such a thing has happened, definitely it'll be a great coup for the United States administration, and definitely it's going to shut up the people there who are still, if I may say so, focused on the Russia threat and the China opportunity. Definitely, I believe that's going to happen. If it has happened, that's, in my view, something very desirable. Look, I want to say one thing very clearly, that, the point is that there have been errors of omission in India as well as United States. And I'm not sure whether this guy was wearing a radioactive suit because he was ordered to do so by some superior, and for what purpose. I'm sure there has been a complete debriefing done of him. And in my view, such debriefing should be there across the board in view of the fact that the Chinese comprehensive warfare strategy is on, and they are neck deep with Pakistan in that. They are very. Russians don't directly intervene in India as a source of a mine of information on the United States military, security, etc. I think a mine that is becoming more and more depleted. As far as the virus is concerned, Sree, the information has been out there from at least, maybe November, December, January, February, these 4 months. It's been out there. Papers are there from March, April. It's been out there. And what happened to them? Many of them were withdrawn. Many of them were not published. What were the papers?
Which year are we talking about?
We are talking about papers that were withdrawn or not published by certain so-called reputed agencies.
No, which year? Which year?
In 2020, last year.
2020. Got it. Yeah. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Nature. Publications which frankly, platforms which frankly became a channel for disinformation and a channel for suppression of information. Fauci keeps talking about science. He's always talking about science. Well, the fact is, science means looking at the facts. Science means questioning the facts that you see. If that had never happened, Galileo Galilei would not have found out that the earth revolved around the sun, because the facts were, quote unquote, from an ancient history, that the sun revolved around the earth. So Fauci is a scientist who doesn't believe, obviously, in looking at facts or going by the current facts. He's gone exactly by the current facts to save his, if I may say so, his credibility. I'm surprised that he has any left, but very distinguished channels, newspaper commentators, and even scientific agencies are still willing to give him the benefit of the doubt after so much has come in the public domain. By April 2020, the facts were there that this was a lab-created virus. And information that I have got, very frankly, and this may be, if I may say so, the 2020 moment in that. In January, February, November, December, when early warnings came of SARS-2, the original virus, that both the alpha and delta variants were also lab created, and they were created not by the Wuhan laboratory, but by other laboratories. By now, the Wuhan laboratory, anybody can have a look at it, and believe me, you won't find anything incriminating there at all. Which is why, that gentleman, Tedros, has been shouting from the rooftops, hey, give us access, give the world access. And I'm very certain that the WHO team will get full access. They can go to every room, every nook, every cranny, even every toilet in the Wuhan Biological Laboratory without coming up with anything. They'll come back and say, oh, yes, we were right in the first time itself. So look, may I only point out, Sree, the second virus is also lab created. And my information, and this may be wrong, I would like to stand corrected. And possibly I'll be standing corrected in a few months' time, possibly in a few more months' time, but I know I'll be standing justified that this thing was a virus made again in the lab. The variant was made in a lab. Whether it is made by the Batwoman or not is something that I may be wrong about. That's what the initial sources have told me. But the initial sources in your part of the world, in some major cities in the United States, I don't want to embarrass them by giving their names. They told me that they knew very well this was a lab-created virus, and it quite possibly was a lab leak. They told me that in February and then later in March. And I asked them, what's wrong with you? Why don't you go public? They said, if we go public, our careers will be ruined. We'll be lucky to escape a lunatic asylum. Send us there. And this is the same gentleman that President Biden is protecting. If he protects Fauci, if he protects his Commerce Secretary, assuming these revelations that you have said are true, well, he is cooking the goose of his own party. And if Joe Biden, I don't think, wants to do that, he's a decent man. I think he's a very sincere Democrat. He's a sincere Catholic. And I do believe that he's a good human being. So hopefully Biden will not fall into this, trap, this bureaucratic misinformation trap, that you have a sectional bureaucracy that is corrupted or influenced wrongly. I don't know which is correct, but which misinforms in such a way that top policymakers are misinformed. I don't know when he's going to, understand that and take action, because if he doesn't, the Democratic Party is toast in 2022. And even Donald Trump, whom frankly I have not had much of a good word to say ever since he betrayed the Kurds and betrayed the Afghans through this deal with the, with Erdogan and the deal with the Taliban. I haven't had a good word to say about him. I can tell you there's a very good chance that it's not Trump. Somebody who's close to Trump. I doubt if that'll be Mike Pence anymore. It'll probably be Mike Pompeo is going to come as the next president of the United States, and he's going to have a landslide victory over any Democratic candidate, including Joe Biden.
Well, we will wait and see, won't we, to see how things play out. But I think this was a fascinating discussion that we had, Professor Nalapat, because we looked at in a data-centric, objective manner as to what has happened in the past 18-20 months, where things are headed, where things are going to be headed. We think that there is going to be a full-scale conflict between India and in China, perhaps also China and Taiwan, because this is my guess.
There is already a conflict, Sree, between India and China. Our social media is attacked as viciously by the Pakistani-Chinese alliance as American social media is being attacked by the Sino-Russian alliance to widen fault lines, multiply the voices of hate, empower the voices of hate, weaponize the voices of hate. Look, the virus has been let loose against our economy. The WHO has been complicit in ensuring that measures get taken that kind of hobble economies, and which frankly destroy the health and confidence of citizens. So we are at war, and India has also been in kinetic war. United States is also in a kinetic war, and I'm sure Taiwan is similarly at war. I'm sure that the social media in Taiwan is even more infiltrated than the social media, in the US and India. So let's be honest. The world, China sees the United States as its number one obstacle to becoming the primacy, the power of, the global primary power. And China sees India as the only country that has the capacity to absorb a huge transfer of units from China to India. These two countries are right there. And of course, Taiwan has been a prime target from the very beginning. The South China Sea has been a prime target. So let's face it, Sree, we are already at war. Both
Thank
of
you.
us.
Thank you very much, sir. And we will be following these trends very, very closely. And I'm hoping that Professor Nalapat will be back again on our channel, perhaps on a regular basis. I'm hoping and keeping my fingers crossed. And because this is a far too important a topic to just sporadically talk about it and then go away. A lot of things happening, a lot of changing, positions, places, and events. And let's hope that sanity prevails, that India and US find a way to pull together and vanquish this arrogant demon that China or the Chinese Communist Party has become. Thank you very much, Professor Nalapat. Namaskar, and we will be back again with such wonderful discussions.